Here now is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, this story keeps getting worse. Right before we went to air tonight, NATO released its own communique, which the New York Times summed up this way. Russia is repeatedly described as a threat to NATO in the document. By contrast, China is described as presenting, quote, challenges. The communique is summed up further by the Times, saying, in a gesture toward diplomacy engagement, the alliance vows to maintain a constructive dialogue with China where possible, including on the issue of climate change. Senator, this is a complete joke. Biden's supposed foreign policy influence was just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. China's now in the catbird seat. Your reaction?
Yeah, So, Laura, I guess you could say that it's good that NATO finally recognized that China is at least a challenge, but if Russia is a threat, China is the threat to the United States and to the free world. And our European allies need to recognize that threat China poses. But instead, you've got Angela Merkel watering down these communiques from NATO and the G7 because she wants to sell more BMWs and Volkswagens into Germany. She wants to keep German markets open. All these European leaders want Chinese money to continue flooding into their countries, all at the risk of our shared common security. And Joe Biden simply did not push hard enough for our European allies to recognize China as the leading threat that we face and that the free world faces.
Well, Senator, when Trump tried to improve relations with Russia, he was accused of being like a Russian agent. But now the media is opining that Russia is growing closer to China. Politico reported tonight, for many years, the relationship between China and Russia appeared to be limited to tactical cooperation or temporary partnerships of convenience. More recently, however, it seems to be transforming into something more sustained and strategic. Senator, isn't this what Trump was saying all along? We don't want them to form their own axis?
Well, that's always been one of the greatest concerns of our foreign policy as it relates to Europe and Asia. If Russia and China were ever willing to cooperate together against the United States. And the very fact that you had Vladimir Putin earlier this year massing forces outside Ukraine, and Xi Jinping continuing to enter Taiwanese airspace, I think suggests that both of these dictators have taken the measure of Joe Biden, and they found him wanting, and they think that they can push the United States around. And some of the rhetoric coming out of the G7 and the NATO meeting, unfortunately, seems to confirm that impression.
Well, we found out recently about the true extent, at least that what we know reported, about China's huge financial outlays to build up their military, Senator. So they are building up their military with all the extra cash they have that a lot of it built up during the pandemic and with this huge trade deficit. But at the same time, our military seems to be getting more woke, more focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and critical race theory and all of that. And you have now whistleblower complaints from members of our military about the pervasiveness of this critical race theory issue. One complaint talked about a discussion on police brutality, white privilege, and systemic racism, dominated by high-ranking and white colonels and a younger junior Hispanic officer. I would later learn that junior officer is a former DNC staffer. And these go on and on and on. What can you tell us, Senator?
Yeah, Congressman Crenshaw and I have received hundreds of such whistleblower complaints since we encouraged members of our armed forces to write to us. I pressed Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin last week at an Armed Services Committee hearing. Let's just say that he didn't want to give simple yes or no answers to basic questions like, is our military racist? Is our country inherently racist? Should people be promoted primarily on the basis of their race and sex? But in the end, he did say that no, of course those things should not happen. And any trooper out there who has this kind of anti-American critical race theory trained or presented to them should report it their chain of command or the Inspector General, other appropriate channels, which I would suggest again tonight in your show, as I have the past couple times I've been on, is through my office or Congressman Crenshaw office as well. It's made a big difference for us.
So you are asking people again, this is the third time on the show, if you're a member of the military and some of this racial bullying is going on and you're watching it, to call your office and get in touch with your staff and tell them exactly what's happened and continue that
Yes.
dossier of complaints.
Yes, please do, Laura. The Secretary of Defense last week acknowledged on the record that our troopers should not be indoctrinated with this kind of critical race theory nonsense. Furthermore, Laura, I'd say that every year we confirm on voice vote in the Senate tens of thousands of military officers' promotions from first lieutenant on up. That includes a couple hundred generals every year. We don't have to rubber stamp those. We can examine them more closely. We can see if these generals have been dancing to the tune of the political appointees of the Biden administration, now contrary to the exact direction of the Secretary of Defense last week. Perhaps we need to start taking a little more careful look at what these generals have been tolerating or even promoting in their commands.
Yeah, and the funding question comes next. Senator, thank you so much.